What was new beginning in 1989 was supply chain science. And it's a combination of algorithms, applied mathematics, increased computing power, linear programming, and other techniques that could expand and extend the supply chains greater than had ever been done before. And enormous thing, a lot of it, people know about just-in-time inventory, like, hey, I got a car assembly line, I got to put in the seats. I want the seats to show up like the morning that car gets to that point on the assembly line. So it's not sitting in a warehouse, not inventory, cuts costs, etc. Walmart invented something called cross-docking. Well, what's that? Well, it used to be a truck went to warehouse, unloaded, and another truck pulled up, and you loaded the truck, and it went away. Well, Walmart said, why don't we just go from truck to truck, skip the warehouse? That's called cross-docking. And then a Walmart store or Home Depot or Lowe's or others, the store is the warehouse. I mean, the reason they're so big is because they're warehouses. So it was like, okay, let's cut out the warehouse, etc. Let's go to China for cheaper labor. Let's consolidate our number of shipping lanes. Well, all that was done, and a lot more. It's all described in the book, for one reason, which was to cut costs, transportation costs, labor costs, energy costs, inventory costs, financing costs, etc. And they did. And this helped to keep costs under control. And Walmart and Amazon were probably the greatest practitioners, but many other firms did it. The problem was, and I described this in the book, there was a hidden cost. While they were cutting all these visible costs and reducing the cost to the end consumer, there was a hidden cost, which was they were making the thing more and more frail, less resilient, less robust, etc., to the point where if one section broke down, the whole thing collapsed. And that's what happened. And I give an example like a loaf of bread. It's like, hey, I got a loaf of bread in the store. Maybe you don't now because of what's going on. Well, okay, but a loaf of bread comes from a baker. It needs a wrapper that's either going to be plastic or paper. It had to get there by a truck. The trucker had to take the bread from the baker to the distribution center or the store. The truck needs diesel. You need a truck driver. Someone's got to make the truck. Let's go over to the baker. Baked in an oven. Where'd the oven come from? Where did the manufacturer get the tempered glass and steel to build the oven? And you need energy to run the oven. And by the way, where did the baker get the flour? Got it from the mill. Where did the mill get it? They got it from a farmer who grew the wheat. That also had to be transported by train or truck from the farm to the mill. And then the farmer needs a tractor and diesel and harvesters and by the way, nitrogen fertilizer, which comes from Russia, etc. So the point being, there's an immense supply chain in a loaf of bread. When you go through, wrapper, baker, ingredients, wheat, farmer, transportation, et cetera, and every link in that supply chain has its own supply chains of, where trucking firms get the truck drivers, et cetera, and on and on and on. So I came to the conclusion, I say this in the book, that the supply chain is not part of the economy. The supply chain is the economy. There's nothing you can think of that doesn't have a supply chain behind it. Now, that's true, and then you stretch these things immensely to cut costs. You've created an enormous fragility, and give you a real concrete example. So, Germany's a major car manufacturer. You got Volkswagen, Audi, Porsche, and BMW, and others. There's several hundred miles of wire in a car, with all the controls and hydraulics, electronics, etc. And you can't just throw the wires all over the car. There are conduits, there are plastic conduits that they install, and then they run the wires through it to wherever they need to go. Those conduits are made by a firm in Ukraine. Well, Ukraine's got a few problems right now, including war, and they can't get them. So BMW and Volkswagen had to shut down assembly lines for sophisticated automobiles, not because they couldn't get chassis or leather seats, because they couldn't get this plastic part, because you got to put that on first, so you run all the wires through it. So, okay, so the war in Ukraine is a big subject in and of itself, but for the lack of a plastic part, a conduit, you had to shut down major automobile assembly lines in Germany. But the point is, you see the point, which is that in the name of efficiency and lowering costs, we've created enormous fragility, and now it's all breaking down, and it's going to be a big job, 5 to 10 year job to put it back together. I like a particular brand of salsa, I like hot sauce, So I go to the supermarket. This is a real story. This happened. I go to the supermarket and there's none on the shelf. They don't have it. I go back the second time, they don't have it. I go back the third time, they got it in a case. There's like a whole case. But I usually buy 2 jars. Well, now I buy 10 jars because I'm like, well, I don't know what's going to happen the next time. Maybe they won't have it. That's an inventory management. That's called safety stock. You buy some extra inventory. So I pay for that out of my pocket, but it's on the shelf behind me here. But the point is, I'm financing safety stock in my own house because I can't rely on the store to have it in the back room. Well, what does that do to the next person who wants hot sauce? They don't get any because I took it all. And same thing happens to me in some other product, and everyone's doing the same thing. So you can call it hoarding, you can criticize it. It is inefficient and it costs money, but that's how people react to real supply chain shortages, which of course only makes it worse because now, who knows when the next shipment of hot sauce is coming in. Take that, multiply by all the products in a supermarket, 20 aisles, 10,000 products. Actually used to work in a supermarket, so I stock shelves up and down the aisles. Well, this is where, it's a great question, this is where we get into supply chain 2.0. So I talked to a guy who, again, supply chain has been around forever. What was new was the science of supply chain management. It's an academic major. You can go to a major research university and major in supply chain science, and a lot of people do. But I talked to the guy who probably the individual who, the single most responsible individual for the creation of the modern supply chain. He was CEO of a major technology company. He said, Jim, you have to understand, it took us 30 years to build this. It took 3 years to blow it up. It's not coming back overnight. It's going to take 5 or 10 years or longer to create the new supply chain. And that's what, as I mentioned, chapter 3 is about. So what I describe is what I call a college of nations. And others have different names. Janet Yellen has referred to it as friendshoring. Emmanuel Macron refers to it as a constellation of nations. But the idea is we're still going to have a supply chain. We always will. But it'll be like a club. And to get in this club, you're going to have to be a democratic, liberal society. I don't mean the politics. I just mean those in the political science sense or the political philosophy sense, not left versus right. But it would be, for example, United States, Canada, New Zealand, Australia, Japan, Western Europe, UK, probably India, and other countries around the world, probably Brazil. But there'll be countries with shared value, good rule of law, good concern for humanitarian issues, etc., who will trade with each other. But it won't include China. Russia will be, maybe they're in the penalty box, but China will definitely not be in it. China will have to construct its own club, whatever you want to call it, that would include, resource suppliers in Africa and maybe outsourcing in South Asia. And there'll be some people who kind of play both sides, and that's fine. But people say the U.S. is decoupling from China, which is true, but China's decoupling from the U.S. This is a second nasty